Well, I was gonna say the first thing I love about cover songs live, and the first thing you should consider, I think, when you're trying to pick the right song, is just what do you need in your set? Let's say you are a genius songwriter who has an hour or 45 minutes of originals. There's probably something missing, mood wise, key, mode, tempo, whatever. Like that. Maybe you're a genius songwriter, but they're all slow, depressing songs. Well, throw in an upbeat cover or vice versa. It's like you probably know where the dynamics or something starts feeling a little bit monotonous in your set. And that can be the perfect place to put a cover in.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of the key things, and this plays into some of the concepts that Tom Jackson talks about with putting together a live show. This is where one of the things that we did for, I think we did it for like a year and a half straight. We had this 70s medley. I've talked about it on the podcast before because I've used the recording of it to drive email signups. But the thing we were looking at when we were putting together our set, this was when our first album was out and it was doing really, really well. We had songs on the radio, was that we only had one album's worth of material. So we were missing some moments in our set. And what we identified that was a key problem was there wasn't this time where the audience just had fun. We don't necessarily write and record music, I would say, is party music or fun music. That doesn't mean it's not upbeat, because that's a different thing. It doesn't mean it doesn't rock, but it didn't engage the audience in a fun, this is, we're just here having fun together type way. And I think a cover song can really help address areas in your set where you're missing those moments. And it doesn't have to be a fun moment. Some of you write just 100% party music and your audience needs a freaking break for a few
They need
minutes
a
to
downer, right?
yeah.
Do Everybody Hurts by REM or something like that. The next thing for live covers that you want to consider is because these songs serve as a musical shorthand. We talked about the invitation, but you're also giving them something to engage with in a more passive way. And in this context, I don't mean passive in a bad way. I guess what I mean is think of a set you're doing that's all your own original material and most of it is unfamiliar to the listener. For them to fully appreciate and enjoy it, they have to have like 100% of their listening energy attuned to you. Whereas a cover, suddenly, if they know the song, they can relax a bit. They might like it as much or even less than your originals, but suddenly their body and their listening energy can just take a break. It's like a breath for the room.
Yeah. And I saw this happen at one of your shows, specifically when you were playing Owl's Den here in Portland, which is a nice sized listening room. I don't know how big the room was, but it was very full. And you had a mix of people that were there to see you because you were doing a residency all week. And so you had fans and friends coming out every night, but it's attached to a hotel. And so you have people that are there just because the hotel kind of promotes it as a feature of the hotel. And there's also a bar in there. And so you get a mix of people that have never heard of you before that are there as well. And I specifically saw like you had a full band and it sounded amazing. And everyone was kind of into it and very appropriately listening and paying attention. But when you did your Katy Perry cover, the atmosphere in the room changed. And it wasn't because everybody in the room was Katy Perry fans. It was because a song they recognized, like we mentioned, but what really struck me in that moment is like the whole time everyone's been sitting here, they don't know Chris, or a lot of the people in the room didn't know you, and they're trying to figure out your songs, like what's he about? What are lyrics? I'm trying to catch the lyrics, the sound, what's going on here? What kind of vibe is this? But then when you do your version of the Katy Perry song, which is also very different, it adds some different layer to your set. I think suddenly people aren't trying to figure out your songs, who you are. They're like, oh, I like this person. Like this song, I get a sense of their vibe now. Now that I hear them doing a song I know, I really like what they're doing. And I could just see the temperature and the vibe in the room shift after that. I'm like, that was a perfect placement of a cover song that really got people into it. And after your set, people went and bought CDs and merch. And I think that was a big part of it. They're like, I like this guy. I want to find out more.
Well, and I think that song works not just because like it's a fun song and I think we do it well, but like my own stuff can be dark and can have a lot of more intricate chord changes and stuff. So there might be this level, like what you're saying is if they're appropriate listening, there might be this worry that I'm like a very serious. So then I do this ridiculous song and I think they can all be like, oh, he doesn't take himself that seriously. So Yeah, it's again another kind of breath of fresh air. But that's an example leads me to another thing I wanted to say is that covers can serve as a memory tool for the audience particularly audiences that don't know you up until that point. And I've had a
Yeah.
lot of times where like I remember I was in a Safeway once grocery shopping and some guy was like, "Oh, were you the singer of that band that did Another Brick in the Wall Part 2?" And I was like, "Yeah, that was me." And then the Katy Perry same thing. And I could take that as an insult, like, "Oh, the only thing you remember about me is that cover?" But no, of course, that's the only thing they specifically remember a year or 3 years later is the thing they already knew, and I think it's a compliment. It's like, "I enjoyed your set enough to remember you did that one thing." So,
Plus, tapping on what you just said, if they had that experience seeing you and thought, "Oh, that was really cool," every time they hear that Katy Perry song, there's a good chance they're gonna think about you.
right. That
Uh,
that's my ultimate mission in life is make
that
people
when
think of
people think about
me when
Katy
they think
Perry, they think about Chris Robley. So, no, but I think that's a key thing that artists should use to their advantage, that there is that connection. And yes, like you said, a lot of times people think about it and they're like, "Dang it, they didn't remember any of my songs." Well, they just heard your songs for the first time. They've heard
Yeah,
that Katy Perry song a million times.
right.
You are trying to capitalize on the known quantity of that song to drive people to know the rest of your catalog.
Yeah, exactly. You had a good point when we were kinda trying to think of notes for this show. You said covers live, they help you expand your gig opportunities. And this is like so important if you want to be employable in a number of contexts as a
Yeah.
musician. It's like you just need songs and it's a lot to ask. Forget about a 3-hour gig. Sometimes it's a lot to fill your own 1-hour set with all originals and keep people super focused. So,
Yeah, I've seen this happen a bunch, and small town poets over the years, especially when we were touring all the time, while we didn't have a problem throwing cover songs in, we probably could have used them more to our advantage because there'd be times where we'd be asked to play 2.5 hours, and we just didn't have a set that long. And I think artists face that more and more now, where there's opportunities like we had Jeff Toohey on a couple episodes back. And he's like, "Covers, originals, I don't care. I just need you to play for X amount of time and keep people entertained." So that kind of environment, it's like, okay, this isn't my tour. That doesn't mean I can't play a bunch of original stuff, but I have to be flexible and adaptable to react to what's happening in the situation to make sure that the talent buyer gets what they need from me. And cover songs really help expand that opportunity. So it's like, hey, I've got my list of originals, I've got a list of covers, and we maybe have a plan for the evening, but we can adapt and be flexible. And if we get the random, person request a song, we can probably whip that one out too.
yeah, totally. And then that just opened up so many different settings for music too. A restaurant gig, a stage gig, a theater, a sports bar, whatever.
And the one bullet point that we have here before we move on to recordings is, you mentioned on your notes that a cover song gives the audience a breath there, and also that they're included as opposed to passive listeners. Like, depending on the style of music, people are always trying to like, all right, everybody move to the front. Oh, come on, why aren't you clapping? It's like you're trying to be sometimes a cheerleader for the audience. Sometimes they're like, come on, you're gonna have fun. We're having fun, right? But when it's a song they know, they loosen up and it feels like, okay, now I'm a part of this. I'm not trying to just figure out what this person is doing on stage. It's like this is a song for all of us to enjoy. Um,
Yeah. The last thing I wanted to say on this list, and this is true for all of these categories, but like learning covers and then having to perform them expands your musical vocabulary. So that could be your chops or your skill as an instrumentalist. It could be, any number of things you're learning about the song. But I think that's particularly true in a live setting where you have to just create it in the moment, as opposed to recording a cover where you can be more methodical. But this really helps you as a player.
yeah. The keyboard player in Small Town Poets, he actually has a band that does very high dollar weddings and corporate events, and it's all covers. And part of me is like, dang, I wish I lived back east and could play some of those shows, because it's like they've learned 70, 80 songs, and just playing those songs night after night would expand my musical vocabulary so much compared to where when I'm mostly focused on writing for Small Town Poets and a lot of my guitar playing, I do other things with, the writing that I do, but it's like I tend to think about the project that I'm working on and not just like, hey, how do I get better as a player? Because ultimately that's going to make my original stuff, whatever it's for, more diverse.